Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 1 of Bloodhunters, which is a tie-in to the Bloodhunt event, written by HAWKEYE. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now up to this point, a group of vampires known as the Structure engineered a simultaneous attack across the globe by using dark force energy to blot out the sun. So in this comic, we will see 3 small stories from different heroes' perspectives as they attempt to fight their way through this vampire assault. So with that said, this issue of Bloodhunters opens with a nice and sunny day with Clint Barton HAWKEYE hiding out at a burger spot. And while he is eating alone, he starts to think to himself, there comes a time in everyone's life when people think you assassinated a UN ambassador, which would ultimately force you to go on the run. Now, his version of going on the run actually isn't that hard at all when he lives in New York. Because all he really had to do was not stay in any one place too long, don't eat at his usual restaurants, and let the city case overload do the rest. And if he is able to keep this up, they shouldn't be able to track him, and eventually, he would be able to make it to Madripoor, or at least that's what he believes. Because on the next panel, 2 officers walked right up to him and asked if he was Clint Barton aka HAWKEYE. Now, of course, he tried to lie, but the officers were not about to fall for that because they immediately called in confirmation on the suspect and requested the police department to send them some backup. Now, with that said, strangely enough, the police request was turned down due to no officers being available to help them out. Now on a side note, I love how HAWKEYE was shocked that they found him even though he grew out a mustache. But anyway, getting back to the story, the once sunny day instantly grew dark as the sun disappeared. So right before the police could arrest him, the citizens outside started to run for their lives as a vampire dived through the restaurant window. So with all chaos breaking loose, the vampire immediately turned to face HAWKEYE. But lucky for our hero, he always had that thing on him, so just as he pulled out his compact bow from his jacket, he simultaneously opened fire directly on the vampire. So with one down, before anybody else could react, he immediately turned to take out the second one, who was right behind the officer that was about to arrest him. So with the officer saved, he turned to look out the window. And just like inside, yet another person was endangered of being killed by a vampire. So just like the previous 2, he let his arrow fly once more. And this one took the vampire out before he even realized what was going on. Now, during this situation, we get a small narration from HAWKEYE saying, he didn't know it yet, but the sun had been blocked out by dark force energy, which allowed vampires to walk New York in the middle of the day, as we have seen back in issue number 1 of the Bloodhunt. But anyway, with yet another person saved, HAWKEYE ended up having a small conversation with the former victim just to find out he was a puppetry therapist. Now on the next page, we see HAWKEYE ended up taking that person with him, alongside other people he saved along the way, and gathered them all on top of a rooftop. So with that vantage point, he tells his fellow survivors that they gotta make their move before there are too many vampires down on the roads. So with everything going belly up, HAWKEYE stood in front of his newly acquired team of everyday people and told them if they wanted any hope of surviving, then they had to band together and fight as one and make the way to safety. Which strangely enough, they end up pulling it off. Now HAWKEYE of course took the lead and proceeded to shoot every vampire that crossed his path, but just because he took out the majority of the vampires didn't mean the other ones did not play a part. Because with one such vampire, HAWKEYE just so happened to miss the heart, which gave the man with the puppet a chance to show what he had, as he plunged his puppet deep within the vampire's chest. So with another vampire down, we then see a priest, who was also amongst HAWKEYE's ranks, scour a building as Clint took out yet another bloodsucker. Now, as the unlikely team of heroes starts to force their way down the road, we see another civilian look on from the window as he starts to gain some motivation. So with that said, Clint then points at the priest from earlier as a vampire managed to sneak up behind him, and right before the vampire was able to strike HAWKEYE, the man from the window made his way to the ground level and saved Clint from losing his head. Now with the fight on, the vampires were now starting to close in, and just before all was lost, the priest says amen, as on the next page, we see an arrow hit a water tank beside the priest. And after an explosion, the water ran down upon the unlucky vampires, causing them to catch on fire. Because apparently, the priest's job was to turn that water into holy water in under 5 minutes. So with that said, this first part of the story comes to an end. So with that story over, we move on to the next small story. And this one starts off in Manhattan with Jonah Jameson and his son running late for their lunch reservation. But when they got outside, just like the previous small story, the sky was completely dark as civilians ran in fear. And out of the sky flew a giant man-bat vampire, but before it could do anything to them, JJ's son turned into Man-Wolf and attacked. So as the two went airborne, Man-Wolf was shocked to see just how many vampires there were. Because above the city, Man-Wolf witnessed the Avengers doing all they could to hold back the tide of Night Walkers. So with that momentary distraction, the vampire took advantage of the opportunity and drove its fangs deep within Man-Wolf's shoulder in an attempt to infect him. So with the deed done, Man-Wolf quickly regained control of the situation and caused the two to dive towards a spike on top of a building, which resulted in the vampire getting eliminated. So with the enemy down, Man-Wolf smashed into a parked vehicle. Now, in this temporary moment of weakness, JJ was overcome with grief as he pulled out a piece of broken wood in an attempt to stake his son, because he was under the impression that he was about to turn into a vampire. But right before JJ could deliver the blow, Man-Wolf was able to catch his hand before being impaled. So with that disaster avoided, Man-Wolf begins to tell JJ that being Man-Wolf makes him immune to the vampire bite. Now with that explained, next we see a couple walking up to JJ and his son, and when they get there, Man-Wolf tells them to take shelter in a church, and if they could, they should tell others to also seek out temples, mosques, and any other forms of holy ground, because all of those places are considered safe. And if they could, they should remember that any religious symbols can protect them too, but only if they personally believe in that faith. So with that out of the way, we see JJ and his son making their way through New York and taking out as many vampires as possible. But see, no matter how many vampires Man-Wolf took out, JJ still continued to yell into his phone as he tried to get a hold of Spider-Man in order to have him save the day. Now this right here really offended Man-Wolf to the point where he temporarily left his father on a park's bench and told him to call Spider-Man to save him instead. But just as he turned his back, 3 vampires started to walk out from the shadows behind JJ in an attempt to bite him. So with things getting hairy, Man-Wolf rushed back into action and attempted to stake them, but with ease, they were able to block it. So with that option out the window, Man-Wolf decided to take the unhumane option and bit the first vampire head off. So with one of the 3 down, the female vampire started to take off, but before she could get away, Man-Wolf threw a stake in her back, knocking her out the sky. So following that, attention was directed towards the 3rd and final vampire. And that one was inches away from biting JJ. But just like before, Man-Wolf just knocked him to the side. Now to me this was funny, because this vampire went on to say he fought beside Dracula himself against the Turks, Saxons, and countless other traitors, for he had the power of centuries coursing through his veins. But with little to no effort, Man-Wolf replied by saying in another world, Man-Wolf is considered a god they call Godstone. And just like that, the crystal in his chest let out a massive blast that cooks that last and final vampire. So with the battle over, Man-Wolf opens up to his father. And during their conversation, Man-Wolf told him that a while ago his father used to hate Spider-Man, and Man-Wolf used to tell him to give him a break. Now don't get it wrong, Man-Wolf is glad that he finally did. But long ago, he remembered his father used to always say that it bugged him that people considered Spider-Man as a hero and paid no attention to astronauts like his son. But now things are reversed, for Man-Wolf is a glorified prison warden and Spidey is now JJ's new best friend. And to make things worse, JJ keeps calling him, like he rather had Spidey there instead of him. So to Man-Wolf, it feels like JJ is no longer proud of him anymore. So with Man-Wolf's feelings explained, JJ ended up telling him that he is always proud of him and he is thrilled that his son is no longer an astronaut and now works on Earth so they can spend more time together. And the only reason why he calls Spider-Man is because he would rather it be his neck on the line instead of his own son's. So with the air settled between the two, JJ and his son took off to a safer location as the story came to an end. Now following Man-Wolf's story, we transition over to a story that focuses more on Dagger. And to be honest, I'll say this one story have the best narrative out of the 3. But anyway, this story opened in the theater district with a woman walking down the road with a hood on. Now, this woman states that she's a long way from Shaker Heights, Ohio, but New York has always felt more like home to her, despite it having its own share of dark times. Well, lucky for her, she always carried a light, and just like that, the hooded woman pulled out 3 glowing daggers and turned to face the 3 vampires trailing behind her, revealing herself to be Tandy Brown, aka Dagger. So with no hesitation, Dagger took off towards the 3 approaching vampires, saying some of Dracula's wannabes want to come out of nowhere and take control of all the dark force users around the world and blot out the sun. And now all the creepy crawlies are coming out to play, referring to the events on issue number 1 of the Blood Hunt. But while she is saying that, she quickly dispatched the first vampire before moving on to the second. And just like the previous one, it also was taken out with little to no problem. Now these vampires were dealers that she kicked off of the neighborhood a few months ago with the help of CLOAK, but now she is all on her own. And before she can react, the third and strongest vampire grabbed her from behind, but that wasn't anything Dagger couldn't deal with, because within seconds she was free and set the big vampire flying. So as he returned to his feet, Dagger prepared yet another round of glowing daggers and launched them his way. But unlike the other 2, this one was faster and stronger, for he was able to dodge all 3 attacks. So following that, Dagger then goes on to say that she knows hunger like they have, because she too felt it when the dark force took her over, and she witnessed it when the same dark energy was too much for CLOAK to handle. So with that attack going nowhere, the vampire went back on the assault and jumped towards our hero, but before he could connect, Dagger leaped away and went in for a surgical attack. And with skill and precision, she systematically took him out by placing several well-placed daggers and key parts of his body, which caused him to burn from within. So with the final opponent defeated, she wondered to herself if the Avengers ever get overwhelmed like this, and if you check out issue 1 of Blood Hunt you will know they did, and it didn't turn out good for them. So as she turned to walk away, one last opponent arrived on the scene. So as she turned to face him, she realized that this new vampire was someone she knew by the name Varen. Now this person wasn't a hero, but was a man that she knew well. He made the best coffee in all 5 boroughs. In fact, her and CLOAK were big fans of his art. So if she could help it, she was really avoiding trying to kill him. So, as the fight went on, she did everything she could not to hurt him and keep him off balance. So with a flick of her wrist, she ended up nailing him to a car that was stationed behind him. So as she tries to speak to him, she wanted to believe that she was getting through to him until the vehicle he was attached to exploded. Now this explosion completely knocked her off her feet, which gave her old friend the opportunity to get the jump on her. But right before he can land on her, a spike came out of nowhere and hit Varen. So with no other avenues afforded to her, she was forced to drive a dagger through his heart, killing him instantly. So with the battle over, Dagger looked up to see exactly who shot the spike. And on the last page, it was revealed to be Elsa Bloodstone, the immortal vampire hunter. And with that said, this issue of Blood Hunters comes to an end. Now with that out there, if you want to stay in the loop about any individual storyline, then how about you hop over to the playlist section down below or in the link cards above to get all caught up on the Blood Hunt event. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.